And welcome back to Fox Weather First. I'm Craig Herrera. Hurricane Milton did quite a number on Florida, from power outages to downed trees, flooded roads, collapsed roofs. We covered it all as this storm made landfall.
The scary part right now is the fact that this is nocturnal. It's in the middle of the night. Impossible to see any projectiles in the area, and that is why I'm constantly moving like this, and I'm bracing myself because these wind gusts have brought me to my knees several times in the past hour.
Yeah, that was Fox Weather correspondent Robert Ray Wednesday night in Bradenton, Florida, as Milton pummeled the Sunshine State. And now, in the days to come, we're getting clearer pictures of the storm's impacts all across cities just like St. Petersburg. Robert stopped by the home of the Tampa Bay Rays to get a closer look at the damage there.
So I was driving past Tropicana Field in St. Pete's, and that's where the roof got cut off. And I'm going to get out and show you that pop that you heard is the fact that this door got whipped open during the hurricane winds. First of all, there's Tropicana Field. On the other side and on top, you'll see the roof as I was driving in. Look at that visual. It's amazing. And then this is what I really want to show you here. Here is part of the roof. This material that was ripped off of the Tropicana Field. Pretty amazing that happened. In there were cots ready for first responders and utility workers. They didn't need it, thankfully, and there was no one in there to get injured, and that is just the best news imaginable, certainly, for sure. As you see, and I just toured St. Pete, that crane collapse, that's all cordoned off. Fire department and officials have that blocked off so no one can get in. Probably smart. It's not structurally good. It's compromised, and they're trying to keep everybody out. But down trees in St. Pete, nonetheless, we are touring this area today and trying to get a feel for exactly what has happened here in the aftermath of Milton. As I leave you with this, more of the debris from the roof here on Tropicana Field. Hi, sir. And there it is, the stadium where the Rays play. Quite the scene here in St. Pete.
Unbelievable. Robert Ray, thank you so much for that imagery. Meanwhile, more imagery coming out from Daytona Beach, Florida. Look at that rough and tough surf out there. It created not only huge waves, but really an extreme rip current risk along not just Florida's east coast, which is where you're seeing video here, but of course along Florida's west coast, where over a 7-foot storm surge was measured in Venice, Florida. And of course, not just Venice, but we're familiar, if you've been to the area, where we have what are called those intercoastal waterways that were absolutely inundated with storm surge as well. So those intercoastal waterways really working into communities and into the canals and different channels that we have. Believe it or not, Fort Myers actually recording its second highest storm surge. Its first highest storm surge was just a few years ago, back in 2022, with the landfall of Hurricane Ian that really brought Fort Myers Beach especially to its knees. Here's what we saw with Hurricane Milton. You know, thankfully, landfall, I guess, for the Tampa Bay region was just south of Tampa Bay. So, Craig, what I think is always so fascinating, especially when it comes to the coastal regions of where Tampa Bay is at, is that sometimes if you see a landfall in Hurricane I just south, right, it's an evacuation of the water out of the bay.
Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar, you probably have seen scenes before where people are walking out over what would normally be covered with water, and it's just all of the mud. A reverse storm surge. But eventually all that water is going to come back, so people had to get out of there. You talked about landfall and it's moving south. Remember, it was the onshore push on the southern side of that storm as you had that counterclockwise rotation, which was giving us that water getting pushed up into places like Fort Myers and into Naples, which is why it was placement, right, Michael, which we were talking about, and just a little bit of a wobble either direction really made a big difference there.
Yeah, over a 5-foot storm surge measured just south of where the eye made landfall. Just incredible, Craig.
Yeah. Let's also talk about Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Florida area picking up the pieces yet again today. Yeah, people in Florida turning their focus to yet another daunting recovery process right after Hurricane Milton's Punishing rampage ended yesterday. Now, the storm making landfall at Siesta Key Wednesday night, pounding Florida. So many people had begun the process to recover and rebuild after Hurricane Helene just 2 weeks earlier. So let's break down these two major hurricanes. Category 4, Helene, made landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. 2 weeks later, we're talking about Milton making an impact over portions of central Florida on the Gulf Coast side. These two storms very close to each other, both of them coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, one of them in the Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico. Milton started in the Gulf of Mexico, moved up, got pulled up by this dip in the jet, which gave it a little more energy to move up, also expanded the wind field and a lot of the heavy rain on the northern side of that storm. And then, of course, the dry air on the southern side causing the tornado outbreak and massive tornadoes at that. Rainfall total was impressive, especially from I-4 all across central Florida. Look at St. Petersburg, 18.87 inches of rain, all the way to Largo, 16 inches of rain, 15+ for St. Helen, and it caused images like this in Tampa, where we had so much in the way of flooding out there as well. Now, the storm itself also came with not only the rain, but the wind. It held as a hurricane as it moved over the peninsula, making landfall as a Category 3, eventually starting to die down, lose some of the intensity and energy down to Category 2, but still was a Category 1 as it moved off the eastern side. Look at these wind gusts. Sarasota, St. Petersburg, 100 to 102. And then as the eye wall was moving off the eastern seaboard, Daytona to Orlando getting hammered with wind yesterday. And in St. Petersburg, here's another look at the aerial perspective, looking into the field at Tropicana Field. And it's just tore apart that fabric that covered the field there. Now, let's look back at Helene and the impacts it had. Making landfall on the 26th in the Big Bend of Florida. Had huge storm surge, Tampa to Cedar Key. Then caused that huge tornado outbreak over portions of South Carolina and the Carolinas. Then, of course, the devastation, the flooding that happened over in through North Carolina and Tennessee. That, as we had so much rain, what was left and Helene made it up into the southern Appalachians, combining with more energy. And that after we had a whole lot of rain leading up to that event. Now, we look back at the destruction made in Tampa. That was from Helene. So Tampa is still recovering. A lot of places maybe even not even getting to the process of recovery. The rainfall totals with Helene were massive. They were so high in the double digits, not only for Florida, but all the way into Georgia and into the Carolinas, where they continue to recover this weekend. You do have some better weather this weekend there, though. And Hurricane Milton, boy, just ripped through Florida, as we were talking about. But as you take a look at this, Michael, here's some scenes that will kind of help us out as we start to recover and maybe look for a little bit of light.
Yeah, this is absolutely beautiful. Boy, as you mentioned, Craig, after a tough couple of weeks, scenes like this kind of restore that sense of normalcy, if you will, for so many. Beautiful. This is shot by our weather producer, Stephen McLeod's parents. Thank you so much for that. More Fox Weather First right after this.
those are just some of the sights and sounds from Hurricane Milton. That Category 3 storm that slammed into Florida, that was Wednesday night. Thank you for staying with us this morning. I'm Craig Herrera.
Yeah, and I'm Michael estimate it came in with a lot of force, 120-mile-per-hour winds, and of course, recovery efforts underway.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk about recovery, we want to start by recapping what happened out there as well. Taking a look at the tornado outbreak, that was a big part of this event, if you will, especially on the southern side of that. We had that cold air move in to some very warm, humid air, caused these supercells, 126 tornado warnings issued. And by the way, Stephen McLeod doing some research behind here, it's the most issued by any state in history. We have to go back to 2011. Second most, I'm sorry. Number one would be Alabama, April 27th.
Oh, yeah, April 27th, 28th. I would remember that one very clearly. Yeah, back in 2011. This was just incredible. And it wasn't just the number, it was the strength and intensity. Typically, you think about landfalling hurricanes and you see the intensities of EF0s and EF1s.
Quick spin-ups, too, sometimes.
Quick spin-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe on the ground for maybe 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Here, it was not only a couple of longer tornadoes, but they were EF3 in strength, which is that's a massive tornado. And the fact that we had a little bit of dry air in there meant that visually, you could see these tornadoes very well.
The one below us there, right? You could see them very, very well. They were massive. You would think that this would be a spring outbreak.
Right.
Certainly not the state of Florida, and especially while you're going through a hurricane and getting ready for it, rather, because a lot of this was starting just as it was before making landfall. But this scene, you look at that, Michael.
Wow.
This is what people out in the plains go to look at. Yeah.
They go to their storm shelter when they see this.
Exactly.
You don't have, and here's what I need people to understand is the fact that you don't have underground spaces to go to in Florida because you take the shovel to the ground and within a couple of scoops, the water's there. The water table's right there. And so, yeah, you look at places like the National Weather Service office in Miami issuing 55 tornado warnings. And again, these were legitimate tornadoes. We look at Vero Beach, and that's what I think Vero Beach is it's almost like a classic look to what you would see in the plains.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of those storms, when you go to all of these, when all the video comes in, there was so much of it. I think that, and a lot of this was happening from I-4 down to the south. Started early in the morning as small spin-ups. We had the instability come in and that dry, cold air, and we got this throughout the afternoon.
Incredible tornadic action, but it wasn't just the tornadoes, it was also the winds. Listen to this.
Man, hurricane force winds there in Florida. This was Wednesday as Milton was making its presence known. That palm tree getting knocked down. You see some of those 2x4s propping up the palm trees. They do look like they're younger and probably planted recently. It's like one of those shopping malls. They put the plants in, and you can tell because the fronds itself, they're trimmed back and they're smaller. So you see a lot of this when you get a new shopping center going in or something like that. Nonetheless, they typically do really well. But with those 100-mile-per-hour winds, it doesn't matter. That's going to knock anything over. And then the wind, let's talk about this, Michael, because you talk about how we said it's a tight system in the beginning, and getting so much energy helped it just maintain intensity as it moved over portions or just north of the Yucatan Peninsula. Then the wind field started to expand, which we talked about here as well. When you talk about where it was on the 5th of October, not long ago, these tropical storm force winds, those bright yellow, they extended, say, about 80 miles from the center of the storm. That's quite a distance. But I'll tell you what, Michael, as this thing advanced, moved closer, that wind field advanced as well.
Absolutely. When it was toward the Yucatan, it was about a Category 4 and Category 5 at times, but it's almost like a ballerina that's, tightly wound, and then as she opens up her arms, it spreads out, and so does the wind field spread out. And so we went from a 80-mile wind field in terms of tropical storm force winds to over a 250-mile wind field. And Craig, that is what brought down a number of trees, knocked out power at one point to over 3.3 million Floridians. It was incredible.
Not only that, but as it made it over the peninsula of Florida, that wind field, still very expansive, all the way down to portions of Miami, clear up into Georgia, and has made it off to the Atlantic side. Same story. That wind field was just so incredible. And I'll tell you what, those hurricane gusts, those orange colors you see there, we saw that in Daytona Beach live here from as we were watching Haley Meyer in Daytona Beach, Ari Sarsolari in Orlando, and then eventually making it back to Bob Van Dillen in Cocoa Beach yesterday, right about this time. Yesterday.
Yeah, I was in Jacksonville Beach, and we actually saw over 60 mile per hour winds. It was incredible to see, for sure.
Good coverage out there. We saw you out there. Thanks for coming back this morning.
Absolutely.
You're telling these stories. And as we do, we thank you for tuning into Fox Weather. Of course, we do this to be a part of your life. We know that it helps you plan your day and you get ready for some weather. We're here for you, so thank you.
Yeah, and of course, it's been a tough past few weeks, especially along the west coast of Florida. Again, we'll be with you before, during, and after the storm. More Fox Weather First coming up right after this.
How's this for a window seat? A plane filled with passengers was forced to remain on the runway as a large tornado passed near Chicago's O'Hare Airport in July. Terrified passengers described the aircraft being shaken by the tornado-warned storms as heavy rain came down. Unfortunately, airports take up large flat pieces of land, making them prone to tornado risk. Here's what to do when you're on an airplane when a tornado hits. Airports often issue shelter-in-place orders during severe storms. In this case, the safest option is to stay on the plane with your seatbelt fastened once you've boarded and on the tarmac. Planes can withstand high winds on the ground, but moving a plane can be dangerous because of the reduced visibility.
It is very uncommon for any airline or pilot to take off or even try to navigate inside potentially tornadic weather.
Finally, if you're in the process of deplaning, get off the aircraft as soon as possible and into the terminal. Only do this once the all clear is given. Airports typically stall all ramp operations during severe storms. So what happens when an aircraft is in flight? If an aircraft is in flight, pilots will typically try to go around tornado-warned storms and try to maintain a distance of at least 20 to 30 nautical miles from those storms. Supercells can reach up to 50,000 feet tall, which is higher than the cruising altitude of a commercial airliner.
Back now on Fox Weather First, Tampa International Airport assessing the airport and facilities on Thursday morning after recording a peak wind gust of, get this, over 93 miles per hour. 6 of their boarding gates were actually damaged by those higher winds, and debris was scattered all over the airport. Several leaks also having to be repaired, and Tampa International plans to reopen in the next couple of hours at about 8 a.m. So a big heads up, especially if you fly on Breeze Airways, Frontier, or Southwest Airlines. Of course, that's where some of the operating hubs are for in Tampa International. And interestingly enough, if you've ever flown in, it's right off of Old Tampa Bay, so very close to where those waters were. Keeping in mind that Tampa International only 26 feet above sea level. But right now, here's what the flights look like. Expect, again, perhaps some more cancellations and delays, not only in Tampa, but you'd head over to MCO. That's where Orlando International Airport is, and even the East Coast. So parts of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International. Don't be too surprised if there's a couple of cancellations and delays there, just given the impacts that we've seen earlier in the week. Otherwise, if you're going to be hitting the roadways, of course, I-75 cuts right through the center of the state. I-4 somewhat impacted. Watch out for some palm trees. I happen to notice that in Jacksonville, toward Jacksonville Beach area, lots of palms and debris in the roadways. Take it slow, take it safe, and take it easy.
Hey, Fox Business fans, Fox Weather has all of your latest travel alerts for your business forecast needs. Thanks for tuning in to Fox Weather First on FBN. A reminder that you can watch Fox Weather anytime on your favorite connected TV device. Find out how at foxweather.tv.
On this Friday morning, welcome back to Fox Weather First. I'm Craig Herrera. Fox Weather is your hurricane HQ, and we are getting closer to the end of October, but hurricane season still far from over. It takes us right to the end of November, but really, we could still have development into December and January, which we've done before, but we still have about 18% of activity remaining here. And when we talk about the activity still in play, we've gone past the peak, which is historically speaking about September 10th. We were talking about that peak probably being about 2 weeks later, and certainly panned out to be the case. And the last two storms that we dealt with, Milton and, of course, Helene, very impactful for so many all across the south and southeast. Of course, we go through the season, and if we get to the next two on the list for the 2024 Atlantic side, we've got Nadine and Oscar. As we continue to watch the season ahead, there's another one that we've been watching well off in the Atlantic, and that is Leslie. And Michael, Leslie has been doing Leslie things, and this morning the center of Leslie right about here, and the thunderstorms are just south of there. It's not vertically stacked. There's a lot of dry air moving into this, and there's a lot of wind shear here, and that is keeping Leslie from getting any stronger, but it's also going to help Leslie get away from here.
Yeah, it's moving up toward the north at about 10 miles per hour or so. It'll become what we call a big old fish storm. You know, the only concern that I see is by the time we get to next week, I think our friends and family in Europe might be, you know, Portugal, you think about Lisbon, Portugal, Madrid, Spain, London, Heathrow International Airport, maybe a couple of bumps along the way with the energy from that. But another area, Craig, that we're watching, Invest 94L in what we call the main development region.
Yeah, this is going to be Invest 94L. You talk about, again, a reminder, Invest, we're investigating the area. You've got this cluster of thunderstorms here, 94, where it's the naming the process we go through, 90 through 99, and L for the Atlantic hurricane season, but about a 40% chance of development in the next week or so. And we talked about the two names, Nadine and Oscar would be next. Well, you know, the early part of the forecast was calling for a very active season as far as names. It doesn't matter. It's those impacting storms, Helene and Milton being a couple of them, Beryl, of course, Francine. So we'll watch what's going on off of the Atlantic as we go through the next few month and a half, really.
Yeah, hurricane season doesn't end until the 30th of November. And of course, Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ, will be with you every step of the way. And we were also with you in St. Petersburg, where we measured winds over 100 miles per hour. And folks, they're still sifting through the debris. Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor has the story from St. Petersburg.
Some Floridians returning home Thursday to find their houses demolished and unlivable after Hurricane Milton pummeled the state as a Category 3 hurricane. Winds over 100 miles per hour, ripping the roofs off homes, knocking down trees, power lines, and leaving behind a path of devastation.
This is home, and it's gone. Home is gone. So home ain't home no more.
Multiple deaths have been reported, and that number could keep rising as rescue efforts continue in flooded, low-lying areas. More than 700 rescues took place in Hillsborough County alone.
Hey, let me spin around.
This includes a 14-year-old boy who was clinging to a broken fence, picked up by the sheriff's office. And the shocking rescue of a man left clinging to an ice chest in the waters off the Gulf of Mexico by the Coast Guard. They say the man was on board a fishing boat when he became stranded at sea overnight as Milton moved inland.
This is a very fluid situation. We are just beginning damage assessment.
Meanwhile, federal officials continue reassuring the public funds are available to help storm victims. This includes cash to help those hit hard by tornadoes triggered by Milton, though officials warned more money would be needed to help with long-term recovery efforts.
We will need additional funds, and we implore Congress, when it returns, to in fact fund FEMA as is needed.
Along with water rescues, crews are still working to restore power to more than 2 million people in the dark. In St. Petersburg, Florida, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Wow, boats in Martin County, Florida, rocking and rolling because of not just the storm surge, which you can see there, but also because of the intensity of the winds and those big old waves that we've seen along Florida's west coast. And as we know, that storm surge really dictated by the angle of approach that a tropical system has as it heads toward the coastline. On top of the storm surge, though, In spots, we saw over 20 inches of rain that fell in just a couple of hours, which of course created several flash flood emergencies, most notably for the Tampa Bay area. In terms of storm surge, by the way, you can see this is from Naples, so southwest Florida, over a 5-foot storm surge, only rivaled by Hurricane Ian that sent that storm surge over 6 feet. And in parts of Venice, Florida, by the way, we saw a storm surge over 7 feet. That is significant for Fort Myers. By the way, it was the second highest storm surge, again, behind Ian. And what's interesting, too, Craig, you think about the Caloosahatchee River there through downtown Fort Myers, and that also began to swell as well. Bonita Springs, where Fox Weather's Brandy Campbell was at, that storm surge pushed in 3 to 4 feet of sand.
Yeah, and when you think about that onshore push and all that it did, plus the fresh water that eventually started to come down, it was all backing up. And the placement of this was something we were focused on, Michael, as we were talking about the storm, because to the north of there, you're getting the offshore wind. Notice that counterclockwise rotation, which is why the storm surge there, we had a negative storm surge. Old Port Tampa, rather, 3 feet where it's moved away from what we normally see. These are images you've probably seen before where people walk out on the mud where the water's supposed to be, but eventually all that water comes back. So that was a reverse storm surge. To the south of there, Michael, where we had the solid onshore push, that's where we saw some impressive numbers out there. Yeah, and that's where, again, the Caloosahatchee River right there in Fort Myers saw a 5-foot storm surge or over that because of all that wind that was pushing and forcing all of that water into the river basins. And so, yeah, unfortunately, some big-time scenes of flooding we're seeing. And from what I understand, Craig, it wasn't just the storm surge, but it was also the rain. Yeah, let's break down the rain. It was pretty extreme as far as totals. In fact, Tampa recording its second wettest day of all time, leading to scenes like this all over the city. The area still pretty soggy out there. It's going to take some time, and a lot of the river streams and creeks, by the way, are still taking their time to recede. It's going to take time, as you know, as all that water starts to make its way back out to the Gulf or to the Atlantic. Let's talk about a new number for St. Petersburg, Florida. It's a record. The total for Wednesday, 18.5 inches plus, 18.54 inches of rain for Wednesday. That is now the wettest day on record. The old one, you go way back to 1915 when they had 14.45 inches of rain. So a new record there for St. Petersburg. Not only were we talking about the wind, we talked about the rain. We talked about the storm being heavy on the northern side, especially along the I-4 corridor and to the north, and that panned out to be the case with many locations receiving more than 10 inches of rain. These are some of the estimates. To the south of there, still impressive, and a lot of that happening with even with some of the tornadoes. Now, Tampa's record, we talked about, it's the second wettest day ever. Back in 1979, they received 11.45, but look how close we were to that. We got 11.43 inches of rain, very close to an all-time record, very close, number 2. Not the kind of records you want to see. And look at the flash flood warnings that were popping up as we were watching this closely. Even a couple of flash flood emergencies really littered all across central Florida. Now, having said that, a lot of the rivers, including the St. Johns, all of those, that one runs from south to north, are still backed up, and it will take some time to get that water back out into, again, the Gulf or the Atlantic. So watch for that this morning and throughout the day, even into the weekend, as they slowly recede. All of the purple you see there are where we've got some major flood stages still in place, and moderate still a concern. We want to see those back below the action stage. We like that low water. Eventually, we will get there as we go through next week. And heads up for friends in downtown Jacksonville, by the way. You have the St. Johns River with all of that water toward the south that flows through the river, and so I think you could see some higher water levels there, not to mention the fact that there is a little onshore push there as well. But boy, you know, Craig, you know, Fox Weather, of course, with folks every step of the way before, during, and now after Hurricane Milton. Yeah, we appreciate you spending time with us here on Fox Weather First as we bring you some of the stories now, and we continue to follow what's been going on all across the South and Southeast. Yeah, it's been a tough past couple of weeks, that's for sure, for millions of Americans. Want to take a quick pause about talking about hurricanes and talk about this. Millions of Americans enjoying the Aurora Borealis. Beautiful. Did you have a chance to see it this morning? I wish. I slept right through it. It's gorgeous, though. But we have images like this to show you. One from one of our producers, Scott. His parents took this. Good guy there.
Yeah, wonderful. And how about this one from Shane Brown? My goodness, beautiful. The different colors, the green, and of course the blue in the middle, ribbons of pink, just gorgeous. Make sure that you download the Fox Weather app, always on, always free. More Fox Weather First on a Friday, right after this.
I'm Brian Norcross with a Hurricane HQ Minute on what to do with a boat when a hurricane is coming. It's a big challenge. In most hurricanes, boat owners can put slack in their lines to let the boat ride up and down as the storm surge comes in. But that's not always going to work, like in Hurricane Andrew. Here at Black Point Marina near Homestead, Florida, it seemed like random luck which boats survived the rising water pushed in by Andrew. How about a dry dock? Well, that only works if the structure can stand up to the pressure from Category 4 or 5 winds. Even a sailboat moored outside the marina was not immune, riding inland as the surge pushed through the mangroves. Of course, we saw all this in spades when Hurricane Ian forced up to 15 feet of water up the rivers and canals and into the marinas in and around Fort Myers. Part of owning a boat is knowing what you're going to do if a hurricane could affect your area. But the fact is, there is never going to be enough safe harbor or good options for a hurricane like Andrew or Ian. Fox Weather has you covered this hurricane season. Find out how to stream us free at Fox. I'm Brian Norcross with a Hurricane HQ Minute on how we know how high storm surge could get at any location along the coast. Every location along the East Coast and the Gulf Coast is subject to storm surge when a hurricane makes landfall. But how high could the water get in a place like Miami Beach here? Well, the science to tell us that is very accurate. The powerful winds in a hurricane push the ocean water ahead of the storm. When the hurricane hits the coast, that moving mass of elevated water is pushed over the shoreline. That's what we call storm surge. It's measured by how deep the water gets above the highest normal high tides. The height of the storm surge can vary tremendously with the size of the storm, the angle of approach, and more. But if the various factors come together in something like a worst possible way, how high could the water get at any one location? The National Hurricane Center has a tool that will give us the answer. For essentially a worst-case scenario, we choose Category 5 at the top. Then if we zoom into the Miami area, you can read off the highest likely storm surge here. Here along the beachfront in Miami Beach, you see the orange strip. That means a maximum water rise of up to 9 feet above normal high tide. But in and around downtown Miami, we see a lot of red areas. That means a surge of over 9 feet is possible. Since we never know exactly how and where a hurricane is going to come ashore, evacuations and warnings are always for a larger area than ends up getting hit. But the people that get hit are always well warned. Fox Weather has you covered this hurricane season. Find out how to stream us free at foxweather.tv.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to Fox Weather First. Thanks for being with us. I'm Craig Herrera.
Yeah, and I'm Michael Estime. Of course, we were talking about Hurricane Milton's impacts all across the state of Florida.
Yeah, and we continue to bring you some of the stories. In fact, we had weather teams spread out all across Florida before, during, and now after. So we were watching Hurricane Milton unleash some of the destruction across the state of Florida.
We'll have a moment where I can get my bearings, and then the wind comes smashing back in. Another strong one about to come in. There it goes.
You see the Manatee River behind me that is raging.
This is the worst of it from what I've seen. The wind tunnel we've got in there is gnarly.
Look at that. Oh my God. Whoa! We just had all this entire tree snap and fall right on our vehicles.
Yeah, just some of the sights. And here's some drone footage from Tampa. The flooded waters standing there still, even with the blue sky above. And these are the scenes we have seen all across Florida. Michael, I want to ask you, because just yesterday we were talking to you. You were live in Jacksonville Beach. You were getting pounded right there with the wind and the rain. And I remember you were out by the pier and by the beach. Can you kind of walk us through what it was like out there?
You know, for Jacksonville and Jacksonville Beach, so many people felt thankful and blessed because the storm surge was not as high as we thought it could be. A lot of people were well prepared, but the winds out there gusting over 60 miles per hour, Craig, really, and it brought down numerous trees and power lines, unfortunately. So Jacksonville Beach, things are looking okay, but you look at places like St. Lucie County, Florida, where the tornadoes, we had, what, over 125 tornado warnings, and obviously National Weather Service crews still going out there to assess the damage.
Yeah, look at this video coming in Fort Myers as they were getting pounded by the wind and the rain. We'll continue to follow, and the stories coming out of Florida today. Taking a bit of a break from all of that, did you see this? Yeah, pretty strong solar storm last night, bringing brilliant eruption.
Wow.
Of the eruption, rather, of the northern lights, and reports lining up the sky all the way down far south. This was coming in from Maine, but I even saw some from Tucson on social media, stretched through New York City, D.C., all across the southeast as well. There's a level 4 severe magnetic storm, and it may at times reach a level 5, rather. So watch for this. The solar storm is forecast to continue through today.
You know what's really dazzling about this? So the pink coloring, that would be above 150 miles in the atmosphere. The green, by the way, is kind of sandwiched in between that just below that, and it's oxygen at lower levels. That's what that is. It's emitted instead of that red due to a higher concentration of O2, oxygen, in the atmosphere. Just beautiful. Also, of course, known as the aurora borealis. I'm so upset because I didn't see this.
I know. I missed it too. I was asleep. But look at all the number of pictures coming in from New Jersey.
Wow.
Just gorgeous. And I think one of our coworkers was out there last night, Stephanie. I want to see what she brought in maybe a little bit later.
Yeah,
hey, by the way, we're wrapping up our hour on Fox Business Network. Mornings with Maria Bartiromo coming up next. Thanks for being with us. I'm Craig Herrera.
Yeah, Michael Esteban. You can, of course, continue watching by downloading the Fox Weather app by heading to perhaps foxweather.com or foxweather.tv.
Yeah.
Of course, we're going to continue talking about the effects of Hurricane Milton, its impacts not only on the west coast of Florida, but central Florida and the east coast of Florida.
Yeah, a little bit of a break from some of the rain, a little bit of light scattered showers today, tomorrow, and into Sunday, especially for the southern part of the state. There's a live shot of Jacksonville, much calmer today. More Fox Weather coming up. Find us at foxweather.tv.
I don't know how to gauge how strong of a tornado is, but I can tell you this. It's lifted vehicles up and flipped them upside down. It's lifted the modular homes off of their foundation. And, I mean, they don't even look like homes anymore. They're mangled.
Right now on Fox Weather First, Florida is now in cleanup mode after Hurricane Milton slammed into the state Wednesday night, taking us through the day yesterday. Sadly, at least 17 people have died. That's the number this morning, and damage, it is widespread.
Craig, it's hundreds of people and pets that were rescued after storm surge and heavy rains flooded not just their streets, but their homes. Power outages peaked at over 3.3 million Floridians in the dark, but thankfully, Craig, power slowly being restored.
Yeah, and Michael, all of this just 2 weeks after the last major hurricane, Helene. Yeah, we are going to be with you every step of the way as Florida now starts to pick up the pieces from both storms and all of the destruction. Fox Weather First continues right now. Hello and a good Friday to you. Welcome to Fox Weather First. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Craig Herrera.
Yeah, and I'm Michael Estman. Of course, all eyes on Hurricane Milton's effects. And at one point, Milton was one of the strongest hurricanes that we've ever seen in the Gulf of Mexico.
We were watching history in the making as we watched this. We do want to begin in Florida, by the way.
There you go again. No doubt, this is the worst conditions we have experienced this hurricane season. Milton, menacing, absolutely menacing right now, whipping through Bradenton. Remarkable energy. Painful to stand out here in this.
Yeah, that was Fox Weather's Robert Ray, just kind of putting his stand right on the ground, center of gravity, trying to stay upright as he was weathering some of those hurricane force winds that came to Florida. 100-mile-per-hour plus gusts reported in Tampa, and record rain led to flash flood emergency, sadly, scenes like this. And then this, too, the Coast Guard, they actually rescued a man that was clinging onto a cooler. This was 30 miles off the coast of Longboat Key. That's near Sarasota. The man was eventually transported to Tampa General Hospital for medical care.
Wow, just incredible imagery emerging post-Hurricane Milton. And it wasn't just that, it was also a prolific tornado event. Over 125 tornado warnings being issued across the Sunshine State, actually breaking the record for the most warnings in a single day. But flooding and tornadoes, not the only dangers that Floridians encountered. Listen to the roaring of those winds. If you've been to beautiful downtown St. Petersburg, you know where that's located. And here's the thing, those type of winds caused a construction crane to smash into an office building housing the Tampa Bay Times and, of course, other businesses. Thankfully, though, according to police, no one was hurt in the incident. However, authorities have confirmed at least 2 deaths in Pinellas County, bringing the total death count as of this point up to 17.
This is definitely the worst storm that we've ever seen. This is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime storm. A lot of the people that live here and have lived here for way, way longer than I have, 30, 40, even 50-plus years, have never seen a storm surge up as high as Helene. And then to get hit with a windstorm right after that, that just did catastrophic damage, like Milton. It's unseen. It's something that we've never seen before and hopefully never want to see again.
Yeah, what a statement, right? Because so many people in Florida have been through this before, and many of them thankfully evacuating. Even folks who said, I've been through this before, many of them saying, this one's different. And it was. The region, prone to hurricanes, of course. And now they begin the task of rebuilding. And this after they just recently went through Helene. Let's talk about Milton. The landfall was a Category 3 major storm at Siesta Key. Max winds at 120 miles per hour. That was Wednesday evening at about 8:30 p.m. So it sped up a little bit from the original forecast calling for about a midnight landfall. Nonetheless, the impacts were all still the same. It was Category 4, Category 5. A lot of talk about that. And we talked about that here at Fox Weather. As it approaches the coast, doesn't matter what category it is, the impacts are going to be the same. The storm surge, the widespread rain, the chance for the tornadoes. Of course, the tornadoes was a big surprise as far as what happened there, but we'll break that down in just a moment.
Yeah, it was an incredible storm, and of course much more top heavy as well, just meaning that north of the eye wall is where we saw an immense amount of rain, over 18.5 inches of rain reported in parts of St. Petersburg. And it wasn't just that. We literally had over 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts on top of it.
No kidding. Let's talk about the forecast track that was issued on the 5th of October. Notice that black line from the National Hurricane Center, and of course that's where we were expecting the center of the storm to go. What a forecast. Yeah. National Hurricane Center has done such a great job always, but especially this season. It was only about 12 miles off the path. And of course, the big focus this year, which they have been focused on as we have been the impacts. There's still power outages. The numbers are going down, but still 2.5 million customers without power at this hour.
Yeah, it was an incredible system, not just because of the hurricane intensity, but as you mentioned, Craig, before, it was the tornadic intensity out of all this. Over 125 tornado warnings that were issued, 55 of those being from the National Weather Service out of Miami. An incredible number. Again, one of the highest that they've ever issued. All those little boxes of red, those are tornado warnings, with a few of those actually being what we call confirmed and noted PDS, meaning that a few of those were a particularly dangerous situation. You look at Lake Okeechobee, points around Lake Okeechobee, and literally, Craig, we had reports of not just, a little water spout here that was like an EF0, EF1.
Right.
We're talking EF3 intensity.
These were supercells that were developed. We had some cold air come in on the backside of that, bumping into all that very humid air. A lot of the correspondents and our meteorologists in the field were talking about this is that tropical feel before the storm arrives, and then boom, right after that. This is the type of setup you'd see in the spring out in the Central Plains, and this is what we saw in Florida. And because of that dry air, you're able to see a lot of this, but they were massive storms, just big storms.
You literally, we call some of these like large wedge tornadoes, and typically we reserve that phrasing for the Central Plains states.
Sure.
I mean, to say that in Florida, much like what we saw, is almost unheard of. As we mentioned before, 55
building your online business
by the National Weather Service in Miami.
Go to Wix.com and set up your
incredible demonstration of the power of Hurricane Milton.
Yeah, while we're on the topic here of these tornadoes, Michael, let's send it out to Fox Weather meteorologist Kendall Smith. Look at the video coming in there from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Kendall is in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida this morning with a look at the damage left behind. Kendall, good morning to you.
Good morning. What's interesting about the images that are coming out of Southeast Florida and much of the east coast of Florida in general is just how reminiscent this is as to potentially a tornado outbreak that we would see in the plains, perhaps my home state of Kansas or Oklahoma, as opposed to Florida. This is very unusual. You were just mentioning some of those stats, and there were 45 reports of tornadoes on Wednesday, including one EF3 tornado, which is an EF3 tornado that just ripped through this community right behind me. So I'm in Palm Beach Gardens in the Avner community, right outside of the Regency subdivision. And we're not actually able to get inside of the subdivision itself. I'm sure that many folks have gotten to see the just staggering, the shocking videos and pictures of a dumpster that was picked up by the tornado and slammed down on the roof of a home. Well, that subdivision is right behind me, and that home is right behind me. The dumpster has since been removed as of yesterday, but the home is still there, and there's a big gaping hole in it because of that dumpster. Now, what's behind me, though, is this is a Chevy pickup truck, and this Chevy pickup truck, it's a Chevy Colorado, for reference, picked up, thrown like a toy, tossed down, just slammed down, rather, and we've got debris everywhere. This has been since Wednesday afternoon. It's Friday morning, and we still have, again, a red flashing light on in the dash, which is kind of an eerie reminder as to what has occurred here. We've got pieces of glass that's blown out. We even have this big old piece of metal. This is what's left of the roof rack right here. I'm picking these things up because it's hard to see since it's still dark this morning. And then pieces of concrete shingles that once were on these folks' homes. And so I'll take you over to some of these homes because the tornado, which has been rated preliminarily by the Miami National Weather Service office as of Thursday afternoon, they gave it an EF3 rating with peak wind gusts of 140 miles per hour. That's a very strong tornado, and only strong tornadoes can do this kind of damage, blast through an entire concrete wall like it's nothing. And then it just kept on going. You can see the damage that it caused to these homes in the distance. There's a blue home just to the left of me. It's hard to make out right now this morning, but there was a couple that was residing in that home when the tornado ripped its way through. There was a piece of metal that just came flying right through their window, broke their window, and went right through their living room, right in front of their faces. Thankfully they were able to seek shelter immediately afterwards, and they were able to make it out alive. But a scary situation nonetheless. And as the sun comes up this morning, I'm very curious to see the scope of what else is around, because I can see trees that are snapped in half. I can see other areas where we've got just tons of metal and debris. So guys, it's a very sombering scene this morning here in Palm Beach Gardens, and my heart goes out to everyone that's been impacted by tornadoes all across the state over the past 3 days.
Yeah, you know, Kendall, sunrise for you at about 7:18 in the morning, so we're just over an hour away from that. Question for you is this: you know, we see the damage where you're at, but how far does that span? Is this like maybe like just the neighborhood you're in, or are we talking about blocks of damage?
Yeah, Michael, so the National Weather Service, as they were providing their preliminary rating yesterday, they indicated that this was a long track tornado, one of the longer track tornadoes that we did see occur on Wednesday. And so just behind me, you can see the path of where this tornado took, where it ripped its way through. So here's the road right over the little kind of median, and then there's that additional community where we also had significant damage as well. So it's going to be a multi-day survey that will have to take place. There are several areas along the path of this tornado that the National Weather Service, their storm survey teams, have to get out there and survey the damage still. But at least in these communities, these are relatively new homes. These are very nice homes, very well-built homes, a lot of them made out of concrete. And that really paints the picture well. When you see damage like this to very well-built homes, you know that it was a violent tornado. And I fear that we're going to continue to see even more shocking scenes as the sun comes up this morning.
Yeah, and Kendall, Stephen McLeod behind the scenes here saying that rating may actually change, so we'll wait to see what the official rating is going to be. I want to ask you this as well, my friend. Do you think, and I'll tell you what, this setup was just incredible. Not the typical type of tornado setup we see with this type of tropical system. Do you think people were surprised? Did you get any feedback from anyone when you were making your way out to the area?
Absolutely. I actually interviewed a couple yesterday in St. Lucie County, which is where the Lakewood Park area and the Spanish Lake community is located, where we saw a number of fatalities at the retirement community. I'm not sure if we've got some of that sound, but the husband did mention the fact that he knew, he was very much well aware of the impacts that were on the way with the arrival of Hurricane Milton. But being on the east coast of the state, he really wasn't as worried. They didn't evacuate, and most people didn't evacuate. They decided to ride out the storm in their homes, but they were not aware that we could see this many tornadoes that were spawned by Milton. They also were not aware that they could be this strong. They thought that they would just be quick spin-up tornadoes. And I remember Wednesday morning getting updates, and I was looking at the low-level clouds, and I just kept mentioning how fast they were going. I was like, man, those low-level clouds are booking it. Like, this is not a good situation. And then I could just look a little higher up in the atmosphere, and I could see that we had a change of direction. It was very clear, very evident. And so the amount of wind shear that was present in the atmosphere was just remarkable, to say the least. And so I knew early on Wednesday that this would quickly transition from a threat of what we could see from the landfall of Milton with the hurricane impact, storm surge, heavy rain, hurricane force wind gusts, to most likely more of a severe weather outbreak. And unfortunately, that's exactly what unfolded. And this is going to be certainly a hurricane that is studied for many, many years to come, because it has been just a wild past 72 hours here coming out of the state of Florida.
Yeah, no kidding. Kendall Smith, we'll wait for sun to come up and wait for your reports. We appreciate it. Thanks so much. Be careful out there. Meteorologist Kendall Smith from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida.
Just incredible imagery coming out from there. But it's not just the tornadic damage. It is also the feet upon feet of storm surge and heavy rain that just swamped local neighborhoods. Check this one out. This is in Tampa, Florida area. You can see where that Publix is on the left. Just incredible. We'll talk about the prolonged flooding threat in the Sunshine State. That's coming up.
And Florida begins to recover. Here's a look at Tampa at this hour. We've got some decent conditions right now. Maybe a light scattered shower here or there, especially on the East Coast. We'll see some of those for southern Florida today, tomorrow, and into Sunday, but nothing real heavy. This is the forecast for tomorrow as we look ahead to central and northern Florida getting a bit of a break. And again, on Sunday is we'll see some of those scattered showers for the southern portion of the state. Fox Weather First. We'll be right back.
Today's weather warning update is sponsored by Realtor.com. Get the Realtor.com app to see the environmental risks on every home.
And welcome back to Fox Weather. Let's dive into today's weather warning update sponsored by our friends at Realtor.com. And one of the big stories outside of the impacts from Hurricane Milton is the fact that we have freeze warnings that are in effect for literally over 2.5 million.
There's lots we can do to help shape our water future.
Parts of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic.
Planting water-wise plants.
Outside, and the first thing you're going to notice is how cool that air is. Note the frost advisories that are also in effect for over 22 million of us. So bundle up before you head out the door this morning in the Northeast.
The scary part right now is the fact that this is nocturnal. It's in the middle of the night. Impossible to see any projectiles in the area, and that is why I'm constantly moving like this, and I'm bracing myself because these wind gusts have brought me to my knees several times in the past hour.
Yeah, that was Fox Weather correspondent Robert Ray Wednesday night in Bradenton, Florida, as Milton pummeled the Sunshine State. And now in the days to come, we're getting clearer pictures of the storm's impacts all across cities just like St. Petersburg. Robert stopped by the home of the Tampa Bay Rays to get a closer look at the damage there.
So I was driving past Tropicana Field in St. Pete's, and that's where the roof got cut off. And I'm going to get out and show you that pop that you heard is the fact that this door got whipped open during the hurricane winds. First of all, there's Tropicana Field. On the other side and on top, you'll see the roof as I was driving in. Look at that visual. It's amazing. And then this is what I really want to show you here. Here is part of the roof. This material that was ripped off of the Tropicana Field. Pretty amazing that happened. In there were cots ready for first responders and utility workers. They didn't need it, thankfully, and there was no one in there to get injured, and that is just the best news imaginable, certainly, for sure. As you see, and I just toured St. Pete, that crane collapse, that's all cordoned off. Fire department and officials have that blocked off so no one can get in. Probably smart. It's not structurally good. It's compromised, and they're trying to keep everybody out. But down trees in St. Pete, nonetheless, we are touring this area today and trying to get a feel for exactly what has happened here in the aftermath of Milton. As I leave you with this, more of the debris from the roof here on Tropicana Field. Hi, sir. And there it is, the stadium where the Rays play. Quite the scene here in St. Pete.
Unbelievable. Robert Ray, thank you so much for that imagery. Meanwhile, more imagery coming out from Daytona Beach, Florida. Look at that rough and tough surf out there. It created not only huge waves, but really an extreme rip current risk along not just Florida's east coast, which is where you're seeing video here, but of course along Florida's west coast, where over a 7-foot storm surge was measured in Venice, Florida. And of course, not just Venice, but we're familiar, if you've been to the area, where we have what are called those intercoastal waterways that were absolutely inundated with storm surge as well. So those intercoastal waterways really working into communities and into the canals and different channels that we have. Believe it or not, Fort Myers actually recording its second highest storm surge. Its first highest storm surge was just a few years ago, back in 2022, with the landfall of Hurricane Ian that really brought Fort Myers Beach especially to its knees. Here's what we saw with Hurricane Milton. You know, thankfully, landfall, I guess, for the Tampa Bay region was just south of Tampa Bay. So, Craig, what I think is always so fascinating, especially when it comes to the coastal regions of where Tampa Bay is at, is that sometimes if you see a landfalling hurricane eye just south, right, it's an evacuation of the water out of the bay.
Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar, you probably have seen scenes before where people are walking out over what would normally be covered with water, and it's just all of the mud. A reverse storm surge. But eventually all that water is going to come back, so people had to get out of there. You talked about landfall and it's moving south. Remember, it was the onshore push on the southern side of that storm as you had that counterclockwise rotation, which was giving us that water getting pushed up into places like Fort Myers and into Naples, which is why it was placement, right, Michael, which we were talking about, and just a little bit of a wobble either direction really made a big difference there.
Yeah, over a 5-foot storm surge measured just south of where the eye made landfall. Just incredible, Craig.
Yeah. Let's also talk about Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Florida area picking up the pieces yet again today. Yeah, people in Florida turning their focus to yet another daunting recovery process right after Hurricane Milton's punishing rampage ended yesterday. Now, the storm making landfall at Siesta Key Wednesday night, pounding Florida. So many people had begun the process to recover and rebuild after Hurricane Helene just 2 weeks earlier. So let's break down these two major hurricanes. Category 4, Helene, made landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. 2 weeks later, we're talking about Milton making an impact over portions of central Florida on the Gulf Coast side. These two storms very close to each other, both of them coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, one of them in the Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico. Milton started in the Gulf of Mexico, moved up, got pulled up by this dip in the jet, which gave it a little more energy to move up, also expanded the wind field and a lot of the heavy rain on the northern side of that storm. And then, of course, the dry air on the southern side causing the tornado outbreak and massive tornadoes at that. Rainfall total was impressive, especially from I-4 all across central Florida. Look at St. Petersburg, 18.87 inches of rain all the way to Largo, 16 inches of rain, 15+ for St. Helen, and it caused issues like this in Tampa, where we had so much in the way of flooding there as well. Now, the storm itself also came with not only the rain, but the wind. It held as a hurricane as it moved over the peninsula, making landfall as a Category 3, eventually starting to die down, lose some of the intensity and energy down to Category 2, but still was a Category 1 as it moved off the eastern side. Look at these wind gusts: Sarasota, St. Petersburg, 100 to 102. And then as the eye wall was moving off the eastern seaboard, Daytona to Orlando getting hammered with wind yesterday. And in St. Petersburg, here's another look at the aerial perspective, looking into the field at Tropicana Field. And it's just tore apart that fabric that covered the field there. Now let's look back at Helene and the impacts it had, making landfall on the 26th in the Big Bend of Florida, had huge storm surge Tampa to Cedar Key, then caused that huge tornado outbreak over portions of South Carolina and the Carolinas. Then, of course, the devastation, the flooding that happened over in through North Carolina and Tennessee. That, as we had so much rain, what was left in Helene made it up into the southern Appalachians, combining with more energy, and that after we had a whole lot of rain leading up to that event. Now, we look back at the destruction made in Tampa. That was from Helene. So Tampa is still recovering. A lot of places maybe even not even getting to the process of recovery. The rainfall totals with Helene were massive. They were so high, in the double digits, not only for Florida, but all the way into Georgia and into the Carolinas, where they continue to recover this weekend. You do have some better weather this weekend there, though. And Hurricane Milton, boy, just ripped through Florida, as we were talking about. But as you take a look at this, Michael, here's some scenes that will kind of help us out as we start to recover and maybe look for a little bit of light.
Yeah, this is absolutely beautiful. Boy, as you mentioned, Craig, after a tough couple of weeks, scenes like this kind of restore that sense of normalcy, if you will, for so many. Beautiful. This is shot by our weather producer, Stephen McLeod's parents. Thank you so much for that. More Fox Weather First right after this.